We have the most successful startup ecosystem anywhere on the planet. I mean, in Finland, you don't have to be 70-year or like 80-year-old male with lots of gray hair or no hair at all to be president or prime minister. We have what is probably like the best educational system on the planet. We have probably like the highest social mobility anywhere on the planet. So you could say that we took this kind of like American dream and made it real. Our bureaucracy is super bad at handling immigration, handling people coming from elsewhere. It's more about like then getting the attitude change going and actually moving from trying to keep people out, trying to attract people.
Hi guys, I'm Matt. I'm originally from India and I'm a Canadian citizen, and I've grown up pretty globally around the world in the Middle East and North America. And I was an exchange student here in Finland in Helsinki at a university called Hanken School of Economics, which is a Swedish-speaking university here. And I had the best 4 months of my life. That was in 2019. And then I decided I had to give Finland a shot and come back for a master's, which I did in 2020. And yeah, in my experience, Finland is my favorite country that I've lived in. And I wanted to talk to tech entrepreneurs in Finland and get perspectives from them about strengths of Finland and areas of improvement. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my first guest, Peter Vesterbacka. He's probably most well known in Finland for being a founder of Slush and being the Mighty Eagle at Rovio, but he's working on a lot of different projects that we plan to talk about. But for starters, Peter, you could give a quick background about yourself.
Yeah, so you already mentioned I'm from Finland, so and I've always been an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship is all about doing. So I think it's very simple, like definition, and I always enjoyed doing things. So I mean, already in high school, I had a small like software business, and that was like back in the Commodore 64 and like those days. So been around for a while. And then you could say that also we're collecting bottles back in the day when I was a kid. There was a big jazz festival in Pori, so my hometown, west coast of Finland. And one way to kind of like make money was to collect like all the empty bottles and return them. So we have we have been recycling things in Finland since like a long time. So it's not like a new invention. But yeah, so that was like a one way to make some like pocket change. Yeah, then I studied marketing at the Åbo Academy Business School, and actually while I was there, then I ended up actually into the entering this like Euro student project that HP was running. So it was like for students that were about to finish their studies and come spend summer in Silicon Valley. I did that, met with all the like people at HP, including Bill and Dave, the founders. So that's why I always kind of like refer or talk about like the garage and like where the Silicon Valley got started, all of that stuff. And I started Slush together with a few friends. So that's now the biggest and best startup event on the planet by far. So that's, you mentioned Rovio. So I was there many years as the Mighty Eagle. For Angry Birds, we made that the fastest growing consumer brand ever. So at one point we did some like studies that 93% of the Chinese population knew the brand, 91% in India, and then 9 out of 10 people on the planet knew the brand. So I think that's pretty good. But anyway, it became a pretty big thing, and also the first gaming unicorn here in Finland. So now we have a few more of those like Supercell and Small Giant and more to come. So very, very high talent density, and you can expect great things in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely dive a little bit deeper at but I guess before we get into that, one thing that I was curious about, I just don't know, but what does the Mighty Eagle really mean? Where does that name come from?
Yeah, I mean, again, always I believe that you need to brand things, and that goes for companies, for people, for products, for like everything. So it's not just let's put some visual representation on our product or our company, but it's like really everything, the full story of like what you're doing and all of that, and that also applies to titles on business cards. So if I would have had when I was at Rovio and working on Angry Birds, if you would have like CMO title, I mean that's like super boring. Then so basically the Mighty Eagle, if you play Angry Birds, that's like the most powerful character in the game, and if you get stuck on a level in the original Angry Birds, then you can like call on Mighty Eagle, and then boom, clears the level, and then like you move on. So it's like a silver bullet, and that's a bit what I was doing at Rovio. So when we needed to get stuff done, that was like what I was doing. So get a partnership going with NASA, or go and play Angry Birds on the lawn of the White House, or whatever it was. So we did a lot of like crazy things. But I think that that's very important that you stand out. And I mean, if you hand out a business card where it says Mighty Eagle, then the first thing that happens is that people will ask like, what is that? Just like you did right now. And it's the same actually with the brand of Angry Birds. That the first time you hear Angry Birds, you'll ask like, why? Why are the birds angry? And even now, I mean, I left Rovio in 2016 after the first movie, and even nowadays people ask me like pretty much every day, why are the birds angry? So I think that is a very good example of like a very powerful brand. And when you're branding your startup or your product, you should make sure that your brand creates some kind of reaction, ideally a question, because then that brand will be stuck in your head forever. And that's kind of like how great branding works.
I can at least personally speak to some of the work that you did, because I was in the U.S. in Houston at the time, when I think Angry Birds was really taking off. And
we actually had a big Angry Birds presence at the Space Center there. So
maybe that played a part in it. And I will say one thing is Angry Birds was definitely very well known. And I guess this kind of goes back to my motivation for the podcast. But I had no idea that was a Finnish company behind that. And I believe Finland has a marketing problem or a branding problem. Sure. I think there's a lot to be done about that, because I found it to be a pretty great place. And then I guess we could go more towards Slush. Maybe you could speak a little bit more about why it was started, and as well, like specifically about the role of students and student volunteers. I think that's really interesting.
So our starting point was that in 2007 I gave a talk to about 600 students at Aalto University, so kind of like one of our best universities here. And I was talking about entrepreneurship, about startups. Actually, the topic was it's okay to be an entrepreneur. And then, basically sharing a bunch of stories. And then I asked the students that, okay, how many of you guys have thought about, starting a company or joining a startup? And in 2007, out of 600 students, only 3 raised their hand. And actually, it's even worse than that, because 2 of the students that raised their hand were international students. So only like 1 Finnish student had even like a remote like interest in starting a company or joining a startup. So then we had to do something about that, because again, if everybody just wants to go and work for like one of the big guys, then again, we're not going to see much innovation, much change. We had to start Slush. So we started Slush in 2008 together with a few friends. First Slush, we had about 300 people, invited some fellow like founders, entrepreneurs to share their like entrepreneurial journey and their advice to the young people. So they were all there, sharing their experiences. And then I invited Matt Marshall, so he's the founder of VentureBeat, because we wanted to broadcast, some of these like great things that we're doing here in Finland and in the finest Bay Area back to, Silicon Valley. And first Slush, very successful. I mean, not a massive event, but I think that we achieved our goal of getting everybody like excited about startups. In fact, there was one guy that came up to me after the first Slush, and he had just moved back from the UK. So he had a startup actually doing phone covers. So that was like a thing back in the day that, early days of mobile. But anyway, he had moved back to Finland, and he came up to me and said that, hey, that he was actually super depressed about like the startup scene in Finland, that he was thinking about like moving back to the UK. But then he came to Slush and said, hey, there's like all these other crazy people. So, it's peer support. So then he decided to actually stay in Finland and start his company, his new company here. So that was kind of like the whole objective we had, was to change the mindset. So we didn't start Slush to kind of like, okay, let's build, the biggest and best startup event. I mean, okay, it became that. But I always believe that events are a great way to make stuff happen, because they events have a date, so you have to deliver by that date. Otherwise, not good. So that's one thing driving things forward. And and then also from the beginning, the idea was that Slush was like non-profit, still is, and that it's run by young people, so run by volunteers. And this is also very important that we have people at Slush. Then now this year at Slush we had 12,000 people, so it's slightly smaller than before the pandemic. But we had about 1,500 young people, young volunteers, and they are there not because somebody told them to be there, but because they love to be there. And the whole idea is that you join Slush as a volunteer. You do Slush for a year, 2-3 years, so you learn how to build the biggest and best startup event. And once you know that, then you go out there and you build the biggest and best startups. So I think that we've seen many examples of that. So it's a massive, let's say, a startup entrepreneurship training program, if you look at it that way. And actually 5 years after starting Slush, I went back to Aalto, same talk, same question, and more than half the hands went up. And nowadays when I go and give talks at like any university in Finland, but also any high school, the same reaction. So we've really seen like this massive like cultural revolution in just like a couple of years. And of course it's like a never-ending thing, but I think that because of Slush and then a lot of these entrepreneurship societies that we started at every university kind of like year after Slush, we have student-run accelerators. So Startup Sauna was one thing that came kind of like a year or two after Slush. We have student-run incubators, student-run VCs. I was actually just in Australia, in Perth, at this West Tech Fest, and then when I was sharing this, then they asked me does that really mean that the students write the checks? And I said, yes, that's what it means, putting students and young people in charge, that they write the checks. And I think that this is something that we're very proud of here in Finland, that we actually have managed to put the young people in charge. And I think that this is something that we take for granted, but it's definitely not the case many other places. And I think that's very important to do, because again, it's biology. Young people are the future. Old people will die. So like we need to invest in our youth. We need to invest in the future, and that's kind of like what Slush is all about. And then one thing about the brand. So one reason why Slush is that the world is full of these what I would call wannabe Silicon Valley events. So you go to an event, and then they will tell you that like it's almost like Silicon Valley, and there are startups and VCs and like all of that. But almost doesn't cut it. With Slush, we wanted to make it very clear that we're not like just another wannabe Silicon Valley event. So we organize Slush in November. So when you come to Finland in November, it's like today as well. It's cold, it's dark, and there's slush on the ground. So it's very clear that it's not the Silicon Valley. It's better. And it's much better because it's different. And again, different because we put young people in charge, and we trust the young people. And now we see the results that we have the most successful startup ecosystem anywhere on the planet. And again, I think that's because we put young people in charge. And it's also not just with Slush and the startup scene, but Finnish society in general. In Finland, unlike some other countries, you don't have to be 70-year or like 80-year-old. I hear that they're planning now, old male with lots of gray hair or no hair at all to be president or prime minister. So you can actually be like a young woman and run the country. So that is something that we're also proud of, and I think that that is very important. That I think that we need to give young people a chance. We need to put young people in charge. And one thing that I say, and I will like repeat always, is that it's a job of us, like slightly older people, to make sure that we keep governments and old people out of the way while young people change the world. And that's also kind of like at the core of Slush and like everything we do here, that it's about putting young people in charge. And then, great things will happen.
Absolutely. I think we'll definitely dive deeper on the importance of young people and how they're treated in Finland. And about Slush, I can personally attest to that, because this year was my first time attending, actually, as a volunteer on the info team.
Very good.
I guess I can't really compare it to other startup events around the world, but I was definitely blown away. So It's very interesting to hear the humble beginnings with what it was in 2008 to what it's become
300, and then
today.
the following year we had like 1,200, and then 4,000, and then pretty quickly scaled to 25,000. And so it's became the biggest and best startup event on the planet. And again, because of the young people.
Right. And I think that's a good segue into start discussing Finland a little bit more with a little bit more focus and I guess strengths of Finland. And to lead you a little bit, given my story coming here as a master's university student, I think education is definitely a big strength here, and maybe it ties to creating certain attitudes and how you teach people and everything. But obviously, I don't have the context of growing up here and what the school system is like. So maybe you could share about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that we have what is probably like the best educational system on the planet. So I think that is more or less like a fact. And the reason for that, okay, we have invested in education since long time, and it's always been about investing in our people, and we don't have like a lot of national resources here. So it's really about providing fantastic education, not just for like a few people, but for all. So that's something that we've always believed in. So that's like the equality, but also a very important part of the Finnish education system is equity. So again, it's not about providing everybody like the same, but we provide the people, the students that need more help, more attention. We provide that. So we really believe in equity, and because of that, education is like a great equalizer. And then if you look at things like social mobility and like all society, we have probably like the highest social mobility anywhere on the planet. So you could say that we took this kind of like American dream and made it real. So that you can actually be born like anywhere, and you can go to any school, and you can end up like doing anything. So I think that's something that is very important, that you have the opportunity to really do whatever you want to do and be whatever you want to be. So I think that's very important. But if you look at then and always trying to explain why, and actually why is a very important question for us. And I was in Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and I was meeting with some parents, and we were also talking about education and educational systems, various places, and Singapore has one of the worst educational systems anywhere on the planet, and then it comes as a huge surprise because hey, what about like they're always up there in like these PISA rankings, but then and I think that I've been to many schools all over Asia, China, Japan, India, Singapore, obviously, Vietnam, so on, and I actually asked the parents there in Singapore that okay, if I ask a young person there, to draw something, what will happen? And like all the parents knew the answer. That if I ask young person there that okay, could you please draw something? They said that yeah, we know. That person will ask what should I draw? And then I will tell them that okay, why don't you draw a cat? And then what color? Black. What size? Okay, huge. And it goes on and on and on. So the educational system basically turns you into this what asking machine, because you're always told do this, don't do this, don't do this. So you're always told what to do and what not to do. And then you very quickly learn as to ask what. So basically educational system, and I think this is kind of like true across especially most of Asia, but many places in the world, that the educational system kills initiative, kills creativity. And I think I always say that that at least we don't do that. And if I ask a young person here in Finland that's gone through our educational system, I ask them to draw something. Most likely, what will happen is that they will ask, why don't you draw it yourself? But they will ask why. And this is very important, because that is exactly what you need to do. And in this, like why don't you draw it yourself? That also is a good example of how our society works. That we question everything, and we question authority, we question hierarchy. So this is something I think is very important for a healthy society, healthy democracy. You know, it's not a coincidence that Finland has 100 points out of 100 in the Freedom Index. So, you know, we take our freedom and democracy seriously, unlike, again, some countries. But I think it's super important. And part of a healthy society is that you are allowed to question. And we do that through the whole like educational system, that you're allowed to question the teacher, you're allowed to question everything. So we always ask why. And even if I'm like the CEO of a company and I ask, you know, like one of the employees that, hey, could you please, you know, draw this, you know, draw something. And then they will most likely ask, like, why? And why don't you draw it yourself? And then I have to explain that, hey, you know, like we have a very important launch coming up and you are so much better at drawing than I am, so I really need your help. And, you know, then that person will like, okay, of course, you know, and then, you know, like we'll deliver something amazing. And I think that this is something that, and again, you know, you will not get fired. I mean, we have many cultures where, you know, like, oh, you dare to question, I'm the CEO, and you're like, what? You're like, you know, go and draw something. You know, so I think that this is something also which is very important. You know, like if you look at entrepreneurs, I mean, entrepreneurs are people who question the status quo, and who people who want to change the world and make the world a better place, and, you know, like all the good things. So I think that is a very important kind of like ingredient to the success of our startup ecosystem, that we have a lot of people here, a lot of young people who are running around asking, you know, like why? And, you know, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And I'm a big believer in this kind of like triple E approach. So you take like education, you take entrepreneurship, you take entertainment. And I think that when you're doing things, it should be fun. You should enjoy what you're doing. I mean, if you ask the people, I mean, you volunteered at Slush. I mean, it was a fun experience. So it's something that, and it's a massive like learning experience. And again, for me, the entrepreneurship part, it's about doing. That you're actually doing something. You're just not like reading a few books about startups and, hey, you know, you're like an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are really actively participating, actively, you know, working on making things better. And I think that's something that's important. So education is really kind of like the foundation for everything we do here. And it's not just that you can like learn about, you know, things, but you learn how to do things. You learn to question things. I think that's something that is very important. So again, we take a lot of these things for granted, but I think that the way to understand why, again, you know, we come back to this why question. So why is education in Finland so good? And I think that you understand when you then look at education, you know, like you go to visit schools and you talk to students and parents in other countries, then you realize that, oh, you know, like, I mean, our schools are, you know, very good, but I think you don't understand how good they are unless you have something to compare to. And I think that this is something that always encourage people that, you know, like you should travel, you should visit, you know, like other places, you should learn. I think it's very, very important. And then another thing that I always say also that of course we can be proud of our education system, but we can never be content. We can never be happy. We can always make things better. And I think that is also kind of like pretty typical in Finland, that, you know, like we're never happy, even though we are the happiest nation on the planet 5 years running and all that. But I think part of it is that we are not happy with the status quo. We want to make things even better, and I think that is one area where there's like room for improvement. So it's very dangerous if you then, you know, like start think that, oh, we figure it out and we can't make things better. So we have a bit of risk of complacency as well.
Let's we'll expand on this for sure a little bit later. And to recap some of the things you talked about there, I think, you know, the equity you talk about, and I kind of like using the word like equality of opportunity. That's something that's very important to me. I grew up very privileged. My dad has the classical immigrant story going from India to North America, and because of that, I've had a very good education and everything. But that's not accessible to everyone in North America because of money. So that's
True.
something that I've come to value a lot here. But then also asking why and how important that is for entrepreneurship and changing these attitudes here. Sounds like I wish I had the experience of trying to actually study here, and see what it would be like. But actually diving a little bit deeper on education, and this would tie to another strength that I've experienced here, and it ties to Slush, entrepreneurship, but I think just the overall startup ecosystem here, maybe the finest Bay Area. And you've talked about this before, at least, the importance of universities and talent density, but for people that don't know, you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that, if you look at any successful startup ecosystem, and then if you take, the classic like Silicon Valley, of course it grew up around, the talent. And where do you find the talent? The universities. Stanford, Berkeley, Bill and Dave, their professor at Stanford suggested when you start a company, they did, and HP happened. Same thing, Larry and Sergey studied at Stanford, and then went and hanged out at their garage, and then Google happened. And you have many, many stories like that. So again, university, and then, making things happen. And I think that the same thing here, we have a lot of fantastic universities, Aalto University, University of Helsinki, Jyväskylä, Turku, Tampere, Oulu, Rovaniemi, all over the country. So again, this really providing everybody the opportunity to of course, get educated, but then, go out and do things. So I think that is very, very important, and that's kind of like where we've seen then these startup ecosystems. A lot of the people studied at, for example, Aalto, and then they went out and started Rovio and Supercell and so on and so on. So the gaming ecosystem grew out around that, and then also actually a lot of grassroots activity. So I think this is also one thing that universities are normally not very good at making these things happen, but the young people are. So they need a bit of encouragement, and then things just happen. So I think that's what we've seen happen here. So universities, education, super important. Because that's where you find the talent, and where the talent density is very high. And when you have high talent density, then things will happen. You bump into people that are like-minded, working on the same kind of things. So in games, we have the highest talent density. We have now about 5,000 people in Finland working on games, and we're adding 1,500. And actually, one thing that is important there is that if you look at the gaming ecosystem, it's totally global. So we have, when I was at Rovio, we had 47 different nationalities. Now it's more than 50. So meaning that, the 5,000 people and then adding 1,500 every year, they come from all over the planet. They come from India, they come from Canada, they come from Brazil, they come from China, US, all over Europe, all over the world. And always hiring the best, because, if you want to have the best the best games companies, you have to have the best people, best talent. And you talk about the strength of Finland and the ecosystem here. I tend to look at the region, and then the finest Bay Area. So we have Finland, Estonia, Sweden, actually the most successful startup ecosystem anywhere on the planet. So if you look at the number of startups per capita, the amount or number of unicorns per capita, and maybe one of the most powerful indicators is the amount of venture capital invested into startups per capita. That's also the highest in the world. So Estonia, OECD numbers last year, Estonia was number 1, Finland was number 2, Lithuania was number 3, and Sweden number 4, and the US was number 5. So I think that is very telling that people want to put their money into startups here, because they expect the biggest returns on that. But yeah, so now we have created a bit of a problem. So we have a huge shortage of talent, because of course that's the fuel that is needed. Capital is the easy part, but people. So right now we're working very hard on increasing the number of international students at our universities. So if I look at Finland, we have about 20,000 currently. We need to grow that to 150,000, and we'll be at the same level as New Zealand, Canada, Australia. Those are the best when you look at that. In all of those countries, more than 2% of the population is international students. I was actually just visiting Perth in Australia and been benchmarking like Curtin University. They are doing a very good job in Australia on this. Same thing New Zealand and Canada. So we're learning from the best.
Yep.
So we want to get our international student population to the same level as these countries. So that would mean 150,000 international students across our universities. So like Hanken, where you're at, and in Aalto, and University of Lapland, and Jyväskylä, and like whatnot. But anyway, so that is very important, because then of course these young people will join the current, like success stories. They will start the next success story. That's very important. Then one other thing, so this is something that I really been working on for long time, increasing the talent density, because I think that the ones with the talent will win, and of course that would be us, all of us here in the finest Bay Area. So we want to increase kind of like the lead that we have over any other startup ecosystem on the planet. I mean, again, that's why finest Bay Area. I mean, there's the San Francisco Bay Area, and that's Silicon Valley, and you have Tokyo Bay Area, the Greater Bay Area in China, with Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Macau. They make all the electronics on the planet. But with all of those other Bay Areas, there's only one finest Bay Area, and that would, again, be us. And it's based on fact. I mean, we take Finn out of Finland and Est out of Estonia, so it's finest. But then one thing that we realized a couple of years ago, that yes, great, we're increasing number of international university students. But what about then, if you look at like our high schools and our vocational schools, there are actually very, very low number of international students. And of course, one reason there is that our education is in like our native languages, Finnish and Swedish. And not everybody on the planet speaks Finnish or Swedish yet. So what we started actually, we started a company. So I always, when see a problem, start a company or something like that. So I think that's the way to do it. But anyway, so we started Finest Future, and we actually started then teaching young people. We started with Vietnam and Uzbekistan. So we taught 7 Vietnamese young people and 8 Uzbek youth Finnish. So Finnish is, of course, like easy language to learn. So half a year and you learn this to this like B1.1 level, which is good enough so you can apply to high school or vocational school. So first year 15 students then learned language, came to Finland, and now they're already in their second year. They're doing great, and this year we had 130 high school students from more than 10 countries, 150 vocational school students, and now we have about 1,000 young people learning Finnish that are coming to Finland next year. And it's been amazing program, and we've been able to scale it pretty rapidly. But then what is maybe the most important thing to me is that when I talk to the young people now that have come here, and then they will tell you that they are very, very happy in Finland. And why? They are very happy because of the education, the school. So I was talking to Muhabat, so she came to Finland from Uzbekistan, and she's now going to Rantasalmi high school. So there's in like middle of Finland. And she said that in Uzbekistan she used to have to take additional university courses like 6 o'clock in the morning. She started so that she would be competitive with the other kids, and then her school days typically ends at 10 in the evening because of all the homework and everything. So now in Finland, basically, short school days, not a lot of homework. So she has taken on a job at the local hotel. She has also started playing guitar, skateboarding, skiing, skating, picking berries in the forest, and she has time for her friends. So like this is fantastic. So she's like super happy. And this is, consistently when we talk to the people who have come here for high school or vocational school, that they are super, super happy. And I think that this is, again, for me, it's great to see that, and it shouldn't be like a surprise. But then, we just take these things for granted. That of course, you have, short school days, and like we're actually focused on like learning for life, not for tests. And maybe the most impressive thing was that I was in Vietnam in the summer, and we met with not only the students but with their parents. And the parents told us that they have never seen their kids so happy. And maybe, you know, this Finland being the happiest nation on the planet, you know, and 5 years running according to the UN, that maybe it's true. And I think that this is something that is again, at least for me, I mean, it's very, very kind of like inspirational, and these are the kind of things that, you know, like keep you going. And I think that this kind of approach, you know, really focusing on this kind of like education-based immigration and integration, I think it's the best way to do it, and it's also it's a win-win. So we can offer the young people fantastic education, and we can offer them fantastic jobs, fantastic, you know, like life in Finland, happy life in Finland. And I think that then we need the talent. So I mean, our technology industry in Finland alone, we need 13,000 people every year just to keep, you know, like the growth. And that's just technology industry. I mean, if you look at Finland in general, we need about 60, 70,000 immigrants every year. So there's a lot of opportunity for people, you know, everywhere to come here and kind of like build their life. And I think that this is something that we'll see over the next few years, that there's a big change coming. And in Finland, we need to get much better at attracting the talent, attracting the young people, integrating, providing, you know, a fantastic experience. So I think that this is something that governments typically, and I mean the Finnish government no exception, our bureaucracy is super bad at handling immigration, handling people coming from elsewhere. So this is one area where I see like a lot of room for improvement, but I'm very confident that like if we revisit this like 5 years from now, it's going to be like amazing. So yeah.
Right. And I appreciate you kind of reading my mind a little bit, kind of already going to, you know, the areas of improvement for Finland, but to parse out a little bit of the strengths there, yeah, definitely this the experience with these finest future kids. I think it shows, happiest country in the world, why that is, just the approach to education. I think that's really important. And this reminds me of a conversation I had just yesterday, because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn posting about positives and, you know, areas for improvement on Finland, and people from abroad have reached out asking about the experience. And like one particular person, his name's Khalil, is from Palestine originally, but he moved to the US and was thinking about a move to Finland. And he, even in Palestine, he knew about Finland and this branding about education, and that's what he wanted. Was his biggest motivation was he wanted his kids to be happy.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's how kids are here. But yeah, I guess going then segueing to areas for improvement. I think you touched on it a bit.
So when is he moving to Finland with his family?
Still a work in process. We have to figure it out. So need a little bit more LinkedIn branding.
We need to connect with him and then make it happen. So I think that typically takes 20 minutes, and then we can convince any family anywhere on the planet to move.
Absolutely.
So, cool.
So I'll be in touch with him in January if you want to join a call with him.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
But then I think back to the areas of improvement. I think already with the Finest Future project, that kind of you know, teaching them Finnish. And this is something we've talked about, so maybe I'll promote it a bit as well. Just that I think you've talked about the importance of the Triple E model, entertainment. So it's like gamified learning for languages. And it was at 6 months to learn Finnish.
Yeah, you get to be 1.1, okay, like 6-7 months. Actually, nowadays we built this so that you have like a year.
Right.
Because first year we didn't have the luxury of time, but now we have like a year, so you learn even better.
So en puhu suomea, at least currently. Jag lär mig lite svenska, but I'm wondering when is this going to be accessible to people in general to accelerate their language learning for a potential move to Finland?
So we now have about 40 Finnish language teachers that are working for Finest Future, and we're going to scale that to a couple of hundred so that we can get to our target is actually like 15,000 high school students, 15,000 vocational school students coming to Finland every year through the program. So it's quite a few. But then we have also looked at then like how can we make it better, faster, all that. So we have now a game that basically you start playing that game, you learn, you know, like vocabulary and soon, you know, sentences and like all of that. So this is something that big believer that you can learn anything by playing games, and that's kind of like what we're doing there. And that's basically you can already download this Earthlingo game and start learning Finnish or Swedish.
Amazing. And then going back to the areas of improvement, I think you already touched on maybe bureaucracy in Finland. So I think maybe a hot topic nowadays in Finland is Mighty, the immigration service. And this is something I think I've been pretty fortunate coming as a student and then switching to a work residence permit. But you hear a lot of stories that aren't so fortunate. So I don't know if you have maybe any thoughts to share about how you
I mean,
see that.
our like immigration bureaucracy has been very, very bad many years, actually for tens of years. But there's now a new guy in charge, and I think that for the first time ever, we actually have some hope of that kind of like getting fixed. So I think that's going to happen. Yeah. So I think that it's very few Finnish people get exposed to this like whole immigration like disaster. So that's why it hasn't been fixed. But I think now through media, there's a lot of attention, and also it's something that we need to fix because we need to increase our immigration numbers significantly. So it just has to work. And I think that again, give it a few years and it will. So I think that right now it's not good, but we'll get there.
Yeah, going back to your entrepreneurship principle, there's no reason for it not to happen, right?
Exactly.
Even impossible,
and it will.
Seemingly impossible things. And then I think made me think of another thing, which is maybe more from my experience, because obviously there's great work with attracting maybe the younger students that could learn Finnish or whatever else to come here, but maybe when you're talking about trying to compete with English-speaking countries like Canada and Australia, I think maybe from the Finnish labor market perspective, there are some barriers to any country with a native language, and I haven't experienced that because I'm in the startup world, and that's a bubble which is fully international in English. But obviously there's other industries that need to attract maybe a lot of English-speaking immigrants potentially, not necessarily, but
and I think that let's say the good news is that everybody in Finland speaks English and English that you can actually understand. So I think that's like important. But then I think that we have of course like the bureaucracy and the whole system around immigration needs to be revamped totally. And again, I'm pretty confident now that next 5 years we'll see kind of like a big improvement in there. We just need to kind of like keep the pressure on and keep them honest. But then if I look at kind of like the bigger picture, so of course like fixing the bureaucracy around immigration and like streamlining the processes, that's like super easy in the end. I mean that's like not a big challenge. It's more about like then getting the attitude change going and actually moving from trying to keep people out, trying to attract people. So I think that is like a complete like step change that needs to happen, and maybe we also need to kind of like blow up the whole thing and kind of like redistribute kind of like the responsibilities for this. So I personally think that we should give the responsibility for attracting new people to Finland, that we should give it to the Tax Finland, because I mean they are basically their interest is to get new taxpayers, new customers. So basically having the Tax Finland take care of kind of like the new customer acquisition and all of that would like be pretty logical, because that's in their interest. So then like that's one thing. But if you look at society, as a whole, I think that we need to first of all we need to accept that not everybody speaks Finnish or Swedish perfectly. I mean, and if you go to the US or you go to Canada or go anywhere, there's a lot of people who don't speak perfect English or anything like that, and that's like it's okay and it's normal, and then typically you get your job done anyway. And I think that here same thing, that we have to accept that, and then also a lot of jobs don't require like a native language. But I think that if you want to be a full member of society, and this goes for any country, if you go to Germany and you don't speak German, or you go to France and you don't speak French, good luck. You're not gonna feel at home. So I think that it's also our kind of like our duty, our responsibility to provide the opportunity to learn the local language for anybody that wants to do that. I think this is something that where again we can do a lot of we can do a lot better. Then now I think that we have a great opportunity. Unfortunately, we have a great opportunity because we have about 40,000 Ukrainians that have had to flee, the genocide in the Ukraine, and I think that now we need to show, that we know what we're doing, and we will do whatever we can to integrate the Ukrainian refugees into Finnish society. So I think that is a very good test for all of us, and I mean this goes for all of Europe as well. But then it's not just about language, and from my perspective that's the easy part, but it's about the attitude, and I think that there we have a lot of work to do so that the companies, the businesses, that they start hiring people that are not native Finnish or native Swedish speakers. I think there's a lot of attitude change, but I think also there the time kind of like will take care of it, because we have a huge shortage of people. So then you don't have the luxury of picking, I only will hire people that speak perfect Finnish. That's not gonna be, there's not gonna be that luxury, and we already start to see that in the like in the healthcare side, that it used to be that the employers were a bit picky on that side, and of course, I mean, it's important that you speak the language so that you don't endanger the patients or anything like that. But now they don't have the luxury of picking people that are like perfect in there, So I think that attitude change is happening, and it will happen through society. So I think it's very exciting times that we will see a lot of change, and I think that we will see a lot of positive change. Of course, there will be a lot of challenges, but like as I said before, how difficult can it be?
Right.
Not very.
And I think I have hope for Finland. I think I see a lot of potential with my experience so far, and I think talking to international people here, I know some people that have lost hope and then have left, obviously, and that's definitely very sad to hear. Yeah. But I think, like you said, I give it 5 years, and I think
we'll have to get them back, and we have to make things better. So I mean, it's like we can't afford to lose anybody, and especially young people. Students have come here to study. We want to make sure that all of them that want to stay can stay, and we need to offer opportunities, and I think that we do. I mean, we have again, as I said, technology industry, 13,000 people needed every year, and that's like again across all the different industries. There's a huge need for talent, and of course in the startup community, I mean, we have a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of talent around. There's a lot of capital around. We're doing a very good job on that side, and we just want to accelerate, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't do like a 10x in 10 years. So I think that's kind of like what we're looking at, and then that means that it's like a super significant part of the economy in the whole like finest Bay Area.
I think that's a really good point, and actually that's generally advice I give to international students or international people in general, and maybe that's an attitude shift that needs to come from them as well, because I kind of ended up by luck at a startup. It was like an opportunity that presented itself, and I was like, okay, I'll take whatever job I can get, and now I'm in love with it, and I can never see myself working in a big corporation or a dinosaur. And I think there could be a potential attitude shift, because I guess there's this perceived risk or failing and instability.
But that's also, we need just to address that. I think it's much riskier to work for a big corporation because they'll fire you tomorrow without any reason, but just because it didn't fit into the strategy or whatever, and the unit is gone, and stuff like that. So I think that I mean, no risk, no fun. So
And I think we might be close to time, but I guess I'm going to try to sneak in one last question, because one weakness that I found, just from my perspective with the startup culture in Finland, and this is from my context coming from North America, where employee ownership is commonplace. I'd say every employee that joins gets some form of equity or stock options. And, through my experience in a startup here and even recruiting, I know that's definitely not a given necessarily. And maybe I'd highlight, I think, Mighty Eagly, like founder and CEO of Volt. I think he's been very public, at least in another podcast, talking about how he has always believed in providing equity
Sure,
to every employee. So just curious, maybe your perspective, maybe you could explain why there's this attitude, if there's benefits of it, or if you think that should change.
Yeah, there are many kind of like angles to that. So first of all, I think that we have, and this is again Finland and actually most of Europe, there is not that tradition, and there's not that entrepreneurial tradition. There's not that startup tradition. So because of that, then the way stock options are treated, from like taxation perspective, has made it less compelling, and so it's kind of like a systemic problem. And I think that we have had some progress, but not enough on kind of like taxation, and this is again like across Europe. But of course, it's the individual like member states in the EU, they decide, and like that's how it goes. So that's like part of the problem that needs to be addressed. It doesn't really help if we give you, stock options if you're, taxed to death for those. So it's obviously like bad, and then that means that we can give you, stock options, but it's like punishing you. Right. So that's like so taxation needs to be addressed. There's still value, but it should be more valuable, and it's. Not going to go into detail on like the tax code, but there's stuff that needs to change. Right. And I think that, again, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll see, better governments and better decision-making and all of that. So I think that it will come. So that's the beauty of like democracy. We have elections and we can elect better people. But then I think that it's also... about the maturity of the startup ecosystem and like everything. I think that it's a question of time, and I think that we have a lot of companies where you have the policy that every employee has some equity, so through stock options and other things. So I think that it's happening, and of course I think it's a very positive development, but again, it's not perfect, and we have a lot of work to do in that. Then I think that if you look at compensation and like salaries and like all of that in general, not just startup ecosystem, I think that this is one area where it's important to look at the big picture, and I think that. If you are, like a young single person, and you look at the salaries in Finland compared to many other places, I would say that salaries in Finland are not amazing. But then I think it changes. So if you look at, families, you have kids, then many friends that analyze this, that they can have a much better life here in Finland than say the UK or the US, and just because here you actually get fantastic education and it's free, so there's no tuition or anything like that. So if you look at that, and the same thing, I mean, it's the whole like primary education, high school, university, everything free, from kindergarten all the way through to your master's or PhD. It's not, like let's say high quality education can be like pretty expensive in many of these competitor like countries. And then I think that also we have a lot of challenges in our like healthcare and like all of these areas, but for the most part, you're not going to end up dying in the street, so we provide good healthcare for all. So I think that overall we can offer good quality of life, and good quality of life is not just about that you have the highest salaries and all of that. So I think that you have to look at the whole picture. But again, that said, yes, we should have lower taxes, but I think that that is something that will happen kind of like over time, and also it's kind of like a pretty general statement. But I think that we need to have kind of like a fair system where basically there is a good balance between risk and reward, and it's not always the case. And I think this again, there's a lot of things that we can and we will do better as a society. So this is kind of like the good news that at least there is kind of like light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. And I think that that is also that we actually, for the most part, we have a society where you can actually make things better. So it's not complete disaster like some other places. So yeah.
Right, and I think maybe that's a good wrapping up point for at least this first episode. I would love to talk more, but maybe you could be a guest another time.
Sure. Yeah.
But I would say in terms of the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe 5 to 10 years. I don't know what the timeline is. We see it with your
summer is coming.
We could see it with the Finnish Bay Area tunnel, and as well. Yeah, I'm excited to see where Finland will be in 5 to 10 years.
We are. Yeah.
And I guess you're pretty active on Twitter, so I'd say if you want to follow what Peter's doing, that would be a good place. But I don't know if you have anything else to plug or promote
that's
or
fine.
talk about.
And Twitter is a good place to find me. So yeah.
Great. Well, I want to thank you again so much, Peter, for the time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Hey, likewise.